And it looks like it is moving. We're connecting to Facebook and Periscope and, of course, YouTube, which is where really the bread and butter is. That's where all of the live chat is taking place, but it's usually the slowest to go live. So let's see how we're doing. And it looks like we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, we've helped many thousands of people facing criminal charges navigate their way through the criminal justice system. Unfortunately, sometimes as we're all going through life, we hit some bumps in the road. Doesn't mean we're bad people, just means we may need a little help to get through it and get things back on track, and that's what we help people do. Now, over the course of those many years doing this type of work, we have seen a lot of problems with the criminal justice system, with the justice system in general, not just necessarily for crimes. I'm talking about misconduct from police, malfeasance from prosecutors. We have judicial misconduct. And of course, we have politicians behaving badly. We have a lot of political turmoil in this country, and they are the ones responsible for how the justice system works. They navigate the laws, they write the laws, they enforce the laws. And so it all kind of starts with the politicians. Now, the politicians, they have a lot going on in America today. So we're just over a week out from the presidential election, which took place on November 3rd. Today is the 12th, and we're getting close to that 2-week deadline, that 2-week mark that we've been out from the election. And there is a lot that we need to talk about because there's been a flurry of activity. Of course, Joe Biden is the projected president-elect. Donald Trump is not conceding. Now, the election is not over technically, but many people are calling for him to make that decision. And so what we are seeing as a result is this bloodbath of lawsuits that are flying all across the country in all of the different jurisdictions. And so it's been a little bit hard to make sense of what is going on. There's so much activity, and it's really difficult to trust a lot of the mainstream news sources because they've been so dang wrong on basically everything this entire year. If 2020 will teach you anything, it may be that you want to rely a little bit less on the experts, the people who come on TV and tell you they know everything and how everything's going to work. They've kind of dropped the ball a lot this year. And so what we're trying to do in this program on this channel is just do a little bit of mental gymnastics, I call it, where we're just going to get in here, see what some of the claims are that are bubbling up around the country and analyze them, break them down, and have a reasonable conversation about what is going on in our country. I am a criminal defense lawyer. I'm not an election expert or anything, but I went to law school and I study these issues a lot, and we've taken a deep dive, and so I want to share with you some of the findings that we've come to on this program. And so, as we always do, let's check our bouncing smiley face and see how he's doing on our election certification calendar. So if we pop on over here to our little table that we're following, remember the election was on November 3rd, and we have all the way up until Electors Day when the Electoral College will ultimately make its final vote. And so we have a lot of runway left here on the tarmac. And so we've got 4 weeks and 4 days after today of this stuff going on, of a lot of lawsuits, of a lot of back and forth. Anybody who knows Donald Trump or who has been watching him for the last 4 years can probably come to the same conclusion that I have, that the likelihood of him conceding, the likelihood that this whole thing just gets buttoned up anytime soon, probably not going to happen. Now, if more evidence comes out, if some of these claims start to sort of pitter patter away, if other states flip against him and the hurdle becomes insurmountable, maybe we'll hear something from him, but I don't know. I think this is sort of his final hurrah, and I don't expect him to concede quickly or easily. So that being said, we need, as Americans, to understand what does the next chapter look like. And really, it doesn't matter what side of the camp you're on. We want Americans to understand that this election was legitimate, because if Joe Biden is in the White House and 70 million Americans doubt his legitimacy, that's a problem for Joe Biden. It's a problem for Donald Trump supporters. It's a problem for everybody. If half the country thinks that the next president, whomever that may be, is illegitimate, that is no good for anybody. So we're going through some claims. We're sort of unveiling some of the evidence and breaking it down piece by piece. And so let's see what we've got today. We have spoken about what the numbers look like for Donald Trump, and we've talked about a couple of the different ways that he may have some success in all of these different states. And so today what we're going to do is we're really going to break this down kind of bit by bit and talk about it from a high level, and then we're going to focus in on what the president and his legal team are doing specifically. We got some information last night and yesterday and even today that Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani, who is his attorney, have narrowed it down, I think, to a couple different states, and we're going to dive into that. So before we do, let's look at the big picture on how the Donald Trump campaign is doing currently. So these are the numbers from yesterday. We went through these just briefly. Remember, the thing I want to show you down here is the total. So Donald Trump currently is down 276,000 votes across these 6 states. And we have some new numbers today, so it actually got worse for the president. It went from 276 to now he's down minus 284. Arizona closed up a little bit, but it looks like some other states like Pennsylvania actually went up. So it went from 46,000 deficit yesterday over to 55,000 yesterday in Pennsylvania. Most of the other states were about the same. You can see the difference there. Arizona, he closed the gap a little bit yesterday, added about 1,000 votes. But it's not looking good for Donald Trump in Arizona. And so you can see here, there's been a full recount that's initiated in Georgia. There is a state superior court lawsuit that's taking place in Arizona. We reviewed that yesterday. We've got some other district court lawsuits that were filed in Michigan. We have another district court lawsuit that we are going to be talking about in depth today, as well as some updates in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania had a new order that came out today that is sort of making the headlines. But I do want to make a quick note about Arizona. Not looking good for Donald Trump in Arizona. So if you are, somebody who wanted him to succeed and win the presidency, not looking good here. Right now, we've got sort of a situation where the Attorney General, Mark Brnovich, is saying he doesn't see any fraud. We have the state Senate leader who sent a letter really kind of saying that she doesn't expect any fraud either, but she does support some additional inquiry into what happened here. And we also have really no likelihood that Donald Trump is actually going to win the state if the votes are legitimate. So we've got a number of outstanding ballots, but Donald Trump would have to win almost all of them at percentages that he's not winning currently in order to actually flip the state of Arizona. And that's a pretty big loss for him, one that was unexpected to me. I live here, and I know kind of what I have seen, and my gut feeling was that there was a lot more Donald Trump support than there was Biden support, but that's just the face level stuff, right? That's just what I see on people's face masks and on their cars and in their yard signs. But, apparently there's a lot of other people out there who support Joe Biden because it's looking like the state may go his direction. Now, that being said, if there is some of these allegations that prove to be true from around the country about the voting software or about, the Sharpies or about any of those things, that could change. And so right now, the big thing I want to leave you with is that we're still pretty early in this thing. Okay. If you're a Donald Trump supporter and you watch this program or watch some of this analysis and you think, God, that sounds pretty gloomy, how depressing. Remember, we have a long way to go, and it's 4 weeks and 4 days. If you are a Democrat right now, if you're somebody who really supports Joe Biden, might not be the right time to get complacent, right? There are a lot of people in the mainstream media who are just considering this election to be a foregone conclusion, and they're already acting past the sale. So the sale, in their mind, has already been completed. Now they're taking the car home and they're waxing it and buffing it, and they're taking their family on vacations, but they don't actually own the car just yet because, as we just saw, the next big date is going to be taking place in December 14th when the electoral votes will actually be cast. There's a safe harbor provision that takes place a little bit before that, but by and large, we're looking for December 14th to come and go. Today, we're going to be diving into a little bit of theory first. I want to hit a Donald Trump tweet that came out about 6 hours ago and use that as a jumping off point. But then we want to go through, and I want to just on a high level talk about some of the sort of a roundup of what we've been talking about thus far, because we really have covered a lot. And it's kind of a point in time now that we're almost 2 weeks out from the election where it's a good time to sort of pause and take a look at what we've accumulated and then maybe weigh some of the pros and cons as it were. So let's start off with a Donald Trump tweet, which is going to be showing us about a new allegation of fraud. And Donald Trump, of course, is the president, and he tweets, and this is kind of a good way to see where his mind's at and see where his energies are being focused. Where is his campaign being focused? What is he talking about? Surely that's going to be where the rest of his legal team is going. And he had a new one today, which is a big one, right? This is one that is not a minor little allegation. So let's take a look and see what he has to say. The report from Donald Trump. Dominion deleted. Dominion is a software company that runs the election machine tabulator company. It says Dominion deleted 2.7 million Trump votes nationwide. That is a huge allegation. Data analysis finds 221,000 Pennsylvania votes switched from President Trump to Biden. 941,000 Trump votes deleted. States using Dominion voting systems switched 435,000 votes from Trump to Biden. Now, he's putting this in quotes, you see here, so the report, and then he's referencing these two individuals, One America News Network and Chanel Rion, who presumably is the person who's reporting this story. So is this accurate, right? Is this a report? Is this something that came from one of the many different analyses that we have seen, something from Benford's law? Yesterday, we spent some time talking about Dr. Shiva and his slope analysis and the algorithmic change that has some velocity, has some actual trajectory changing down from what looked like was expected down to sort of a lower weighting of votes that would actually go against Donald Trump. We did some analysis on that yesterday. So I don't know what the president is actually referencing. It sounds like he's referencing a news report and he's, amplifying that signal. But why? Is that because he's got some actual evidence of this stuff, or because they're big numbers and he likes big numbers and he likes to share the big numbers? Because those numbers would be consequential. Okay, we just talked about the deficit that Donald Trump has here, about 283,000 votes. And the numbers that he's talking about here would flip that. If 2.7 million votes were actually stolen from him or somewhere around those numbers, that would change the course of the election. It's a big claim, it's a big data, and it's a big number. And that's what he needs. This idea that they're going to go in and invalidate, a couple thousand provisional ballots and then get the election overturned is a stretch in my mind, right? We're looking for big disqualifications, big buckets of voters somewhere that would be disqualified, or maybe the votes aren't real or they don't count, or whatever the allegations are. It needs to be consequential. And we haven't seen much of that lately. We talked about a little bit yesterday that, the evidence is looking kind of soft in a lot of areas, but this is a big one. But is it true, or is this just hyperbole from the president? But it does introduce a new allegation. It's this voting software theft. It's Dominion is involved, maybe at the highest levels. And so we've got some more things to talk about. But before we do, let's go through a list of the 15 different types of fraud allegations that we've kind of have discussed on this program thus far. And then we want to go through and see what each one of the states, the battleground states, what kind of status they're at as it relates to some of these claims. Then we're going to move forward and we're actually going to dive in to what Donald Trump's legal team is doing, what those lawsuits look like, and how it might impact the election. So let's talk about just the general types of fraud, because I think it's important to understand what we're talking about. Some fraud is more consequential than other fraud. Some fraud is kind of irrelevant, right? And we all expect that there is some fraud in elections. Some people are going to vote twice. Some people are going to vote for their grandmother. Some people are going to do those things. But is it consequential? This is the big issue. And we saw this in Bill Barr's memorandum when he posted this. I think we talked about this Monday or Tuesday, where he actually set some guidelines for the Justice Department to investigate these things. And one of the criteria was that it has to be consequential enough to impact the election. If his prosecutors at the DOJ are going to go and investigate somebody who's, fraudulently engaged in manipulating 1,000 votes, okay, well, that's not going to change anything. In Pennsylvania, he's down 50,000 votes. So it's got to be much bigger than that. And I think that's an important threshold. And so what we're seeing from a lot of the Trump campaign is a lot of the inconsequential stuff. And I want to show you what some of that looks like. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't something big, but what we're seeing right now is just not significant enough to alter the course of the election. But other stuff may be coming. Now we have a new tweet from Donald Trump that says, we're talking about 2.7 million votes here. Is there smoke? Is there fire where underneath that smoke? We don't know yet. So let's talk about the general allegations. And you can, if you're playing bingo at home, get your bingo card out, because if you've heard these, you can mark down your card and maybe you too will be a winner. Let's take a look at these fraud allegations over here. So one would be voting twice, right? A single person voting twice, once by a provisional ballot, one by an absentee, or so on. People are voting while dead. People are voting after moving states. So you may be in one state, move, and not have residency in your original state, but still get a ballot and cast that. So you cast a ballot in your old state and your new state. People are throwing out votes and losing votes. We heard some of this from U.S. Postal Service people. In Arizona, there were pictures of rocks being thrown in trash cans. We're finding ballots in dumpsters. Not rocks in trash cans, but ballots in trash cans. We've got incidents where there's signatures not matching the voters. So some allegations are claiming that when the ballots are coming in, they're scanning them into the counting software, into the tabulating machines, but the signatures don't match. So it's probably not that person's vote, right? That sounds kind of fraudulent. This idea that the USPS, the U.S. Postal Service, is backdating votes so that they can't meet deadlines, clearly illegal, right? If the deadline is on November 3rd and they get a ballot on November 4th and they backdate it to November 2nd, that's illegal. We have this allegation that ballots are being scanned repeatedly. This came from Kayleigh McEnany, who actually said that I think there were stacks of ballots that were being counted 4 or 5 times during the tabulation. Changing votes while at the tabulation centers. So literally this idea that they're fixing old ballots or bad ballots or spoiled ballots. They're reissuing them and then recompleting them on behalf of voters. The allegation that people are voting for other people. So we saw some of this with Maidengate, using prior names, using alternative names. We've got, voting for other people by going and collecting their ballots. So I just saw a headline that somebody in Texas was indicted on 145 counts of voter fraud for collecting ballots at a nursing home and filling out the ballots for all of the senior citizens living there. We have this idea of software glitches. Heard a lot about that in Antrim, Michigan, and elsewhere. We have human error in tabulations. Some of those big swaps from Joe Biden over to Donald Trump have been claimed to have been human error, right? It's just a human error. Somebody with an Excel spreadsheet just didn't know how to enter that number in there. We've got weighted votes, which we talked about yesterday with Dr. Shiva, so that some votes count more than other votes, or some votes, say for Donald Trump, are actually underweighted, so they don't count as much as a regular vote. Now we have some interesting additions from Donald Trump, algorithm adjustments in the software, and Dominion specifically manipulating the votes. So that's it. And there's a lot more than that. There's a lot more where that came from. This was just a list that I just came up with this morning when I was thinking, God, we've covered a lot. And now there's new allegations of voter fraud. And so let's see what each one of the different states is doing with this. So when we go over to this slide here, you're going to see that most of this stuff I've sort of categorized one way or the other. We've got Sharpie Gate, which happened in Arizona. The allegation here was that Sharpies were causing the rejection of ballots. And we have a closely related issue down here with the green button. We spent some time talking about this case out of the Arizona Superior Court, where they were basically saying that they were pushing a green button and then it would cause voters' ballots to be invalidated. We've got Maidengate, which I think there's some evidence of. There's been a lot of people who say that there were votes cast in their old names, former names, or disabled people's names or maiden names, that there were votes being cast. I think it's a little too early to understand the consequence or the significance of that, but I know there are a lot of resources taking place there. The illegal deadline extension is a claim which is taking place in Pennsylvania. We have an update on that came out from a lower level Pennsylvania court. We're going to get to that here in this show. We've got some observation problems. A lot of these types of issues from the Trump campaign taking place specifically out of Pennsylvania and Michigan. They're saying that the Trump campaign staff is not giving access to the vote tabulation, to watching what is taking place. We're going to dive into that. These are big claims, and I think this is where a lot of their allegations are going to be stemming from. So we want to make sure we understand what they're saying there. Other people, there's been kind of some evidence, I would call it weak evidence, where they're saying that people were showing up with wheelbarrows and truckloads full of ballots and delivering them after hours. Again, those really came from Michigan, a lot in Detroit. Algorithmic problems, Dr. Shiva, we talked about that yesterday. Allegations against Dominion for manipulating the actual software. I really think that's a theory right now. I haven't seen enough evidence to support. I haven't seen really any evidence other than some mathematical formulas and mathematical equations that you can infer, which is a good way to start. It's a good kind of first step that will give you some idea that there may be some fraud going on, and then they can look and investigate further. We have this big idea that we're talking about with Matthew Bardley, I think his name was, where he's doing this out-of-state voting stuff. So voter data may show that there were votes cast without residency. And so we talked about that. I think that was maybe Tuesday, where he had the big flow chart, and he's putting these voters into different buckets and cross-referencing them with the national change of address form. And he's got call centers and all of those things. So a lot of this stuff is pending, and it's early. So we don't know how fruitful it's going to be, but we do know what we can discuss that's in front of us today, and we have some lawsuits that we're going to get into. One from Pennsylvania and one from Michigan. And there's been some headlines about those today, so we'll get moving in there. Before we do, I said this show is going to be a little bit heavy on theory before we sort of break down the lawsuits, because it's important that we're understanding what we're talking about when we do get to the lawsuits. But I want to discuss this idea of what's called a legal remedy. Okay, a remedy is where you are essentially made whole. If you're going to be filing a lawsuit, we want to know, what are you asking for? Okay, obviously you're angry about something, that's why you're suing, but what do you want? What do you want from that other side? What do you want to get out of it? And so when you look at the legal definition of remedy, actually Wikipedia had a good one that I thought was pretty decent. And it says here, a legal remedy is also known as judicial relief, or a judicial remedy is the means with which a court of law, usually in the exercise of civil law, enforces a right, imposes a penalty, or makes another court order to impose its will to compensate for the harm. Okay, it's a big one. Compensate for the harm of a wrongful act inflicted upon the individual. Okay, so we obviously know what Donald Trump wants, right? He wants all these votes thrown out. He wants people to stop counting. He wants a lot of that stuff. It's actually not that clear. It's not that easy. And so we're going to do a deep dive on remedies, but let me give you just a quick, simple kind of layman's explanation of how this works. Let's say that you are driving a car, somebody rear ends you. My first car that I ever got was a 1994 Camry. It was pretty rough. I bought it from my stepdad, worked all summer cleaning pools and doing chores and doing all sorts of things in order to get that car. If I would have been in an accident in that car and my car was totaled or damaged, I would only be able to get compensation for that 1994 Camry, right? That makes sense. Somebody rear ends me, totals that car, it's $1,000, $2,000, whatever I paid for it, and that's it. That's all I get. If I lost the car in an accident and I wanted to go get a BMW, or I wanted to upgrade to, a Tesla or something like that, obviously that wouldn't be fair compensation. Okay. Now people would make the argument, and they do all the time, and say, well, I need a new car and I can't go get the old one, and I was going to buy a new one anyways, and I had valuable things, or that car was sentimental to me. That was my grandmother's car. That car was passed down for 7 generations back from the 1700s. Those types of claims, they don't hold any water. There's no merit to them. You can't get more compensation than what you're entitled to. So when we're talking about an election, Donald Trump's compensation, the remedy, would have to be big, really big. We're talking about 250,000 votes, whatever the number was. Significant, right? When they're filing lawsuits that are going to be remedies that disqualify 200 votes, 300 votes, 1,000 votes, even 10,000 votes. What if they got 10,000 votes disqualified as a remedy in Michigan? That's not any good. It's not going to change the election. It's not going to flip Michigan from blue to red. And so there are a lot of different remedies. More than, if Donald Trump's filing a lawsuit and says, I want a do-over on the election, that's an impossible remedy, right? It's so big, it's so broad, and the harm has to be relative to the remedy. So what Donald Trump's team needs to do is they need to show significant harm, something that is massive collusion, that's multiple parties, multiple people involved. And thus far, they just haven't done it yet. Today's a new claim. This idea that Dominion now has 2.7 million votes that they falsified or manipulated, that's a big claim. And now there is a big boogeyman, Dominion, that they can actually say was orchestrating this entire conspiracy. So we'll see where that goes. Now, as we were talking about when I went through all the different fraudulent claims, each one of those is a harm, right? We know that, okay, that's wrong. You can't go vote for your grandmother. But what is the remedy? Is there something equal to fix that harm? And so I did the same thing, just like I did with the fraud. What are the different remedies that might be possible in an election? So let's take a look and dive into these a little bit. Remedies. So at the top, we're going to start with some of the ones that I would say are less serious. They're not as big. They're not as consequential. So obviously, stop counting until access is allowed. Okay, so we saw a lot of claims here from the Trump people. They said, they filed lawsuits almost immediately after the election, and they wanted to go in and just observe the counting. So a bunch of their initial lawsuits were just saying, stop counting. That's it. People were making a lot of hay about that. There were, headlines all over. Donald Trump is suing to stop the count of the votes. he's a totalitarian dictator, and he's trying to undermine democracy by not letting votes be counted. Well, that's not really what they were asking for. They were asking to stop the counting until the proper protocols were in place so that people could come and watch and observe. Now, the counter response to that from many who are on the opposite side of the argument, they've all said they had access. They had plenty of access. They were in the room. They're making all this stuff up. Don't worry about it, right? And so that's where this gets litigated. Both sides, they come into court. They make their claims. I don't know who to believe. I wasn't there. You probably weren't there either. It's up to both sides to bring their evidence into court and submit it and make their case. And then the judge can review the evidence and issue a ruling. And if either side doesn't like the ruling, they can appeal it. Okay, and they bear the costs of that, and they have the burden of proof. So the system works pretty well. Not a bad deal. And that's where we started. Now, it's slowly working its way down, and let's see what other remedies there may be. So we can see here that a court could also order a recount or a recanvass or an audit. We saw some of that going on. It wasn't a court order, but we saw some of that in Georgia yesterday with their Secretary of State. Another remedy would be that they could audit and disqualify very targeted, very specific allegations of voter fraud. So, for example here, let's say Miss Mary went and voted and her ballot was not counted. Okay, we're focused on an individual level. We're focused on an individual voter. If one voter, their vote was bad or something happened to that one person, we're talking about one vote. That's not consequential for the Donald Trump campaign. That's not going to work for them unless they find huge buckets and they have huge call centers and they get massive numbers of affidavits for everybody in all these different swing states that he lost. It's a big hill to climb. Number 4, 5, and 6 are all closely related, but they're all sort of different levels of intensity or different, I would say, scopes. So we start with a small scope. So you could audit the elections and disqualify certain specific precincts. Okay, so this is a pretty big deal. And I think this is something that actually may be in the arguments at some point, where they're actually going to go through precinct by precinct and say certain precincts were not following the rules, therefore all of the votes should be disqualified. A bigger sort of chunk of land geography-wise would be a county. Okay, so rather than disqualifying the specific precincts, now you're disqualifying whole counties if counties did not follow the protocols. You can audit and disqualify buckets of voters based on a category regardless of the geography. So instead of talking about precincts and counties, we could talk about entire categories. So you can see here that the individual, I think Bardley, that we were speaking about, is really focused on this national change of address concept, that people were voting from different states. And so it doesn't matter what state you're in. If you're in the wrong state and you're voting in 2 states, you can be anywhere in the country and you're in this bucket that they're trying to identify. You could also move forward and try to audit and disqualify huge swaths of votes based on procedural problems. So there's some indication or there's some claims that are taking place out of Pennsylvania that they were not using secret envelopes, or they weren't keeping and maintaining their secret envelopes, and therefore all of those votes should be thrown out. And then we have number 8, which is where they're going to try to dump out huge buckets of voters based on a judicial order, based on election rules. So this is a big one, and I want to just pause on this. This is what we're seeing happen here. We're going to see this in Pennsylvania with an order that we're going to get to here today, and this is the issue that's knocking on the door in the Supreme Court. There's a lawsuit. It's right there. It's already, we've already seen some orders about it from one of the Supreme Court judges, Judge Alito, who is now indicating, from what I have read, that he is not happy with what happened in Pennsylvania. Now, that doesn't mean anybody else on the court is going to be on his side, but he is looking into it, and I think they're scheduled for oral arguments, or at least something very, very soon. So that is pertinent. It is coming up. Now, the other 2 things, which I think are extremely unlikely, but they are potential remedies, is they could order a new election. It could be a new election in a particular state. Theoretically, the Congress or they could pass an order for a new election nationally. I don't think any of that would ever happen. It's never happened. I don't think there's any precedent for it. But they could also do this. They could invalidate the vote, and then they could just send it over to the legislature. Now, some of these are not necessarily judicial remedies, but these are some of the things that the Donald Trump campaign is working towards. They want something that's going to flip the script. That's going to reverse course a little bit. And so that's just kind of a brainstorm of some of the different potential solutions here. But again, when we're looking at these lawsuits and these issues, is any one of these remedies enough? You can see here, it's not going to be a small remedy that's going to reverse any of this stuff. It's got to be a big one. We have some indications that there are some pretty big ones that they're sinking their teeth into, and we need to decide whether they're good claims or not. So let's start here with another Donald Trump tweet, and then I think we have a video from Donald Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. So yesterday, on November 11th, yesterday evening, right as we were in the middle of the show, he couldn't have sent it a little early so we could have covered it yesterday, sent it just as we started the program. He says here, nobody wants to report that Pennsylvania and Michigan didn't allow our poll watchers and or vote observers to watch or observe. This is responsible for hundreds of thousands of votes that should not be allowed to count. Therefore, I easily win both states. Report the news. And this claim about election fraud is disputed, according to Twitter. Now, you can see these get a lot of play here, and I don't even know what the numbers are like today, but 69,000, 66,000 retweets, 12 quote retweets, 12,000 quote retweets, 286,000 likes. A lot of people are in this, and they're retweeting this, and so, this is reaching millions and millions of people. So what can we glean from this? And this is going to match Rudy Giuliani's statement as well. So two points here, Pennsylvania and Michigan. So you're going to hear that from Donald Trump, and we're going to hear that again from Rudy Giuliani in this next clip. So these, I think, are the two states where they're really focused on. Haven't heard much about any of the others. There's lawsuits that have been filed in Arizona, lawsuits that have been filed in Nevada. We've got some stuff going on, elsewhere, but these two states seem to be where these two guys are hanging their hat. And so yesterday, Rudy Giuliani was on with Lou Dobbs, and it was a long 5-minute clip. I clipped out most of Lou Dobbs, and we just have some clear answers from Rudy Giuliani. He starts talking about Pennsylvania first, so we're just going to hear from him on Pennsylvania, and then he transitions and talks about Michigan. We're going to save the Michigan part of the clip until we're done with Pennsylvania, then we're going to get into Michigan. So here's what Rudy Giuliani had to say yesterday on Lou Dobbs.
Let's talk about where you are right now in Pennsylvania first.
Well, first of all, in Pennsylvania, we filed our suit yesterday, where we have a schedule with the federal judge now to given our briefs. We hope to have a hearing as soon as possible. We'll have to figure out if we want to call all of our 50 witnesses or some of our 50 witnesses. I can assure you we have affidavits galore to back up what we're saying, and that what's being said in the mass media that we have no evidence is a complete, absolute lie, just like they've been lying for years. And we're ready to go. I mean, we could go to trial tomorrow. I don't think the state is ready to go to trial. They clearly corralled Republicans, put them there like animals, wouldn't let them see any of the ballots that were being counted. We now are up to a count of about 650,000 ballots that are unlawful ballots that were cast in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. No doubt about the fact they're unlawful. The law set by the state legislature that under the Constitution gets to govern presidential elections was that every ballot had to be observed by a Republican and a Democrat. Well, none got observed by a Republican. Almost none. Well, certainly 635,000.
All right, so two big things right there. Number one, he's talking about evidence, right? Evidence is something that is sort of an abstract term for a lot of people. I've seen a lot of headlines out there that are saying, well, all they have are affidavits. All they have are people's statements. That's not any evidence. And people think that that's true, right? We actually have a lot of people who come into our office and they say, well, there's no real evidence that they have me doing anything. They don't have any text messages. They don't have any video surveillance. They don't have any audio recordings. All they have is somebody saw me do it. My girlfriend says I did that, or somebody, there's somebody else. Well, that's all you need. It's called personal knowledge, and that's what most of evidence looks like. People just come into court and they testify. Happens all the time. Somebody comes in and says, that guy punched me in the face. Okay, well, what evidence do you have? Did you record it? Did he text you that he did it? Is there surveillance footage from the bar? Do you have any witnesses? Did anybody else see him do it? No, I don't have anybody. But I was there. That guy punched me in the face. Here's what happened. Okay, that's evidence. It may not be good evidence. It may not be the best evidence, but it is evidence. And in fact, many criminal cases move forward only on that. It's called personal testimony. And the reason why our justice system thinks it's valuable is because the other side gets to cross-examine that person. So if somebody was in court alleging that something happened against one of our clients, we would get to ask them questions, and we would get to draw out their statement, and then the prosecutor would get to come and just grill them, cross-examine them. You see it in the movies where, isn't it true, and isn't that true, and aren't you, and okay, that's it. And our justice system says that's a good thing. We want evidence to be challenged from both sides so that we can find out what the truth is, so that the jury can hear, man, that guy sounded really credible, until the prosecutor came and just shred him to bits. Or the defense attorney, we do with expert witnesses. Expert witnesses will come in and we'll try to beat them up as best we can. Sometimes they're great and they're very skilled. Sometimes they're terrible and they get kind of embarrassed. So it's one of those things that it's a good thing. And that's what he's talking about. So when he goes through and he says, we have thousands of affidavits and a ton of evidence, I don't doubt him on that. Now, many people will say that's not good enough. We need more information. We need more evidence of a collusion, or who's orchestrating these things, or who was the person on top that was communicating to all these different poll watchers in order to move this fraud forward. People are looking for that. I don't see it yet, but it may still be coming. So that's point number one. The other point here is about the evidence, but it's about the claim. What is he claiming actually happened? So if you rewind that and listen back to what he had to say, he's talking about the main issue, his main beef in this whole lawsuit is that they didn't get the chance to observe the votes. And we're going to go into the lawsuit next, and I'm going to show you what they're claiming. But that's it. They didn't get to see the tabulation moving forward. They weren't there in the rooms when they were counting, and they weren't in to observe any of this stuff. And so Rudy Giuliani's claim is that it sounds like to me that any of those votes that passed through the system that weren't observed, those shouldn't count. That's a big claim, and I'm not so sure how good it is, but let's take a look at the Pennsylvania lawsuit before I dump into the commentary. So this was filed in the United States District Court out of the Middle District of Pennsylvania. You can see here, we've been following a lot of the Pennsylvania lawsuits for a long time. And here, this is Donald Trump for president through his lawyers and some other individuals suing Kathy Boockvar, who has been the subject, one of the household names of the country because she is the Secretary of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. She's responsible for the votes. So when we go in, we're going to see here that the initial order, so this is some of the law that they're talking about. They're saying the Supreme Court has made clear in case after case, every vote must be protected from the diluting effect of illegal ballots, right? And the idea here is that if there's a bunch of illegal ballots, it's going to diminish and dilute the legitimate votes. There is no question. So these are all different Supreme Court cases. You can see here this U.S. is a Supreme Court case, Crawford v. Marion City. We've got another U.S. Supreme Court case, Reynolds v. Sims, and so on. All Supreme Court cases. So this is what Donald Trump's campaign is leaning on to make their case. They're saying every vote must be protected. There is no question about the legitimacy or the importance of the state's interest in counting only the votes of eligible voters. So the Supreme Court has said it here, said it here, said it here. And their claim is that the disparate treatment or the unequal treatment of Pennsylvania voters is subjecting one class of voters to greater burdens or scrutiny than another. And that violates equal protection guarantees because the right of suffrage, the right to vote, can be denied by a debasement or a dilution of the weight of a citizen's vote just as effectively as by wholly prohibiting the free exercise of the franchise. And that's basically saying if you dilute somebody's vote, you might as well just take the vote away from them. If their vote doesn't really count for the full amount, it's basically just as bad as not giving them the right to vote. So they go through and they lay out some of this law, and they're saying the U.S. Supreme Court has said the vote is so important. We need to protect the integrity of the vote. And there's really no denying it. It's enshrined in case law all throughout from the 1960s, 1964, 2008, and so on. And that's sort of the foundation of their argument. They go forward, and now they actually will dial this down. So they're starting at the top or at the bottom, laying a good foundation, and then they're going to go in and say that the Pennsylvania Code, the Pennsylvania law itself, outside of what the Supreme Court has said, actually creates the position of what's called a watcher, which I thought was pretty perfect since the show is called Watching the Watchers. I really like how Pennsylvania just kind of, ran with that term. You're welcome, Pennsylvania. But let's take a look at the Pennsylvania Code. It says here, as it exists today, Election Code 417, codified at 25 PS Section 2687, creates the position of a watcher. That's the people who are watching. Literally, this is by election code. Watchers entrust to each candidate for nomination or election and each political party and each political body which has nominated the power to appoint watchers to serve in each election district in the Commonwealth. So anybody running for office, just go and create your own little watcher, and they'll be able to go and watch, right? That's by Pennsylvania code. That's in their law. And the Trump campaign is saying they're breaking the law. And this is what they're asking for. So this is the actual remedy. Okay, so the harm here, we already discussed, the harm is that they didn't get to go watch the votes being cast. They didn't get to participate in the monitoring of an election. And by not being able to monitor the election or observe as a watcher, that is a violation of their rights. And what do they want in order to rectify those rights? Well, they talk about it in paragraph 15. They give us a nice little summary at the beginning of the opinion. And so I want to show you that. Now, when we get to the Michigan opinion next, I want to show you the actual order, or the actual, it's called a prayer for relief that they're asking for specifically. So in Pennsylvania, I'm going to show you sort of a generalized layman's version of what this looks like. And then in Michigan, I'm going to show you the legal stuff. So you get to see kind of both sides of it. So in Pennsylvania, this is the order that they're talking about. It says, it's a huge block of text. I'll summarize it for you quickly. Plaintiffs seek an emergency order, so something done quickly, that prohibits the defendants, in this case the government, from certifying the results of the election. That's what they want. They want an order prohibiting the certification of the election. And that's important, because if they rush through and certify this thing, then any of the other challenges, I think, will be moot at that point in time, because the election is over, at least according to Pennsylvania. And they're saying, look, if you're not going to grant that, in the alternative, give us an emergency order that stops the government from certifying any of the results that included the tabulation of absentee and mail-in ballots which do not comply with the election code. So they're saying, look, we want you to stop certifying everything, but if you don't, just certify this, refuse to certify this small subset of absentee and mail-in ballots which are already in violation of the law. They're saying the tabulation of these ballots without Trump's watchers, when they were counting those, Trump's watchers were prevented from observing, or based on the tabulation of invalidly cast absentee mail-in ballots, all these problems with these specific ballots. They're saying they lack a secrecy envelope. They do not include the outside envelope with a completed declaration, or they're delivered in person by third parties for non-disabled voters. So they're going through and they're saying absentee and mail-in ballots shouldn't be counted or not certified, or if they're going to certify the election, exclude those different ballots specifically. Finally, they're saying, lastly, in addition to the alternative, they want a permanent injunction requiring that the county election boards will invalidate ballots cast by voters who are notified and given an opportunity to cure their invalidly cast mail-in ballot. So it's like a lot of legal text, a lot of legal language there, but basically they're saying, look, all of the votes in Pennsylvania are tainted because our watchers didn't get to go and observe the tabulation process. And we want you to not certify the election until we sort some of this stuff out. That's essentially what they're asking for. At this moment in time, they're not really asking to, throw all those votes out, but they are asking in the alternative, if they are going to certify the election, that they do not certify with those outstanding buckets of votes. And specifically, it's the absentee and the mail-in votes. And so, that's kind of questionable. How many are in those different buckets? Okay, if it's 1,000 votes or 2,000 or 10,000 votes in one of these disqualification buckets, then he's still not going to win the election. That state is still not going to flip. So I don't know how many are in there. There's a lot of speculation that it's kind of a small number and that this is not going to be significant for them. But there are other lawsuits pending. So we saw today that there was a lower court order from the Commonwealth Court in Pennsylvania that was a victory for Donald Trump. And so, it's a trend in the right direction if you're a Donald Trump supporter. But if you're not, if you're somebody on the other side, you just say this is all totally inconsequential. It doesn't really matter. But I may disagree with that. Let's see. So this is from the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, Donald Trump for president, and suing all of these different election boards. Now, this goes on and on and on. It's a huge first page of everybody who's being sued. And this is the order that came down from the court. So a judge who's in the lower level court, this is not the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, this is not the United States Supreme Court, this is a lower level court. I'm sure it's going to be appealed. But let's go through it because it is significant for Donald Trump's campaign. Now, it may not be consequential. In other words, it may not be enough to flip the state, but it is significant because it's a victory. And I think it's in alignment with what the U.S. Supreme Court is going to do on a much grander scale. Again, I don't know that's going to be consequential because we don't know how many votes we're talking about, but it's indicative of how these legal issues may play out if this goes up. I think this is going to be a big issue that the Supreme Court is ultimately going to have to decide, but we're just not there yet. So what is this lower level court judge saying that's going to be, sort of transition up to the top higher level Supreme Court judges? The election, truthfully, may turn on an issue like this. So in Pennsylvania, we have this order. It says, so on and so forth, memoranda. The court concludes that Kathy Boockvar, who is the respondent, she's the Secretary of the Commonwealth, they're saying she lacked the statutory authority, okay? No authority, no ability under the law to issue the November 1 guidance to the board to change the deadline. So that's essentially what they're saying here. Kathy Boockvar on November 1st changed the deadline, and she didn't have any statutory authority to do that. And specifically, the guidance changed the deadline here in Section 1308, and it also sort of, I think, waived the requirement that certain electors verify proof of identification so people could just go and vote without ID, right? Or modified some of those rules. And so the court said, you can't do that. Accordingly, the court hereby orders that the respondents are enjoined, meaning they're not allowed, they're prohibited from counting any ballots that have been segregated pursuant to paragraph 1 of this court's order dated back to November 5th, granting a special injunction. Okay, so this means that there is a bucket of votes that is not going to be counted. They're enjoined from counting those votes. Now, this could be appealed, this could be reversed. So, this is all very fluid right now. So, if somebody wants to replay this video 5 years from now and say, no, that got overturned, I know it's all fluid. This is a lower level court, and there's a lot of stuff that's happening all over the place right now. But what this judge is saying is you can't count those. You're enjoined from counting those ballots that have been segregated pursuant to paragraph 1. So for Donald Trump's team, this is a win. And I think it's a fairly significant win because there's going to be more of these types of orders. This was the entire argument out of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court case that went up to the Supreme Court and got kind of kicked back down because Judge Roberts didn't want to make a ruling on it before the election. We made a video about that way back then. We said this is going to be a problem. I don't know why they didn't just decide it before the election. Well, they refused to do that, and now this whole thing is just muddy as can be. So they're going to ultimately have to decide it, I would expect, unless they, for some reason decide to grant a writ of certiorari, but I think that they will. So that's Pennsylvania. A significant win, but it may be inconsequential. So there's a difference there. It's good legally for the Trump campaign, but if that bucket of votes is minor, it may not flip the state back over to Donald Trump. But this is all still pending. It's still percolating all throughout the court system. So we'll see what ends up happening, which is why it's good that you hit the subscribe button and join us, because there will be updates on this and more. All right, so that's Pennsylvania. Let's jump on over to Michigan. So as I explained previously, we have another video here from let's see here. Oh, before I move on there. So let me give you a quick response from a professor from Kentucky College of Law on the Pennsylvania case. So he says, here's the deal. His name is Joshua Douglas, and he was over on lawandcrime.com. He said, here's the deal. Biden's lead in Pennsylvania is over 54,000. There's nowhere near that number of ballots subject to this decision to make up for that kind of lead. So that's one person's opinion, and he's a professor over in Kentucky. That's over on Law and Crime. So take that for what it's worth. Now, if that may be a smaller bucket than what we see in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court may say anything that came in after Election Day is totally invalid, and that might be a bigger bucket. So hold on to your hats there. We'll see what the Supreme Court does with this. All right, so back to Lou Dobbs, back to Rudy Giuliani. Last night, again, he was detailing some of the legal strategies in several different states. The other one that he spoke about was Michigan. So I want to hear from him. This is the man who is the president's lawyer, and presumably he is, helping decide a lot of these high-level decisions about where to spend resources, where to file lawsuits, how to, basically prosecute this claim that the election was fraudulent. So here he is talking about Michigan now. The first clip was from Pennsylvania. Now let's talk about Michigan, which, if you'll notice, he says might be even bigger than Pennsylvania. So let's see what Rudy Giuliani has to say.
More lawsuits to bring like that. We brought another one late last night. I guess maybe it didn't get as much attention. In some ways, it's bigger than Pennsylvania. It's the one in Michigan. The one in Michigan, the same thing, about
Right.
320,000. However, the one in Michigan has some very, very interesting witnesses. One witness is an employee of the city, a Democrat, who became so incensed and upset with what she called massive cheating that she decided she would give an affidavit. They started training her in September. She said they started training her to cheat. They taught her how to eliminate signatures that didn't look good, how to file ballots even if they didn't have signatures, how to find places to get people who aren't registered by going to the registration book, finding a person who hadn't registered in a long time, or putting in a new name. During the pre-election period, when people came in for mail vote for early voting, a lot of them were taken over to the machine or to place they're going to vote by Democratic workers who taught them and showed them how to vote for Biden. She did it herself at the request of her superior. And then she said the situation when they were counting the mail ballots was an atrocity, that Republicans were shut out. That the ballots were counted. Ballots were counted without even looking at whether the envelopes were certified or not. That there were many ballots that looked exactly the same way: Biden, 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 Biden. And
one of the things that I.
Yeah. So the big claim again there is that ballots were being processed without proper observation. And so they could just go and manipulate the ballots that were coming through the tabulation centers. So in other words, they didn't get to see it, so therefore it must be wrong, which is a bit of a stretch in my mind. Let's see what he actually had to say on Twitter. So he says today, this was posted 2 days ago. Today, the real Donald Trump campaign sued to invalidate hundreds of thousands of fraudulent ballots in the Western District of Michigan. We're going to look at that lawsuit right now. He says first Pennsylvania, then Michigan will go for Trump. Affidavits will be published tomorrow. You will be shocked. And so we are going to dive into the lawsuit here in a quick minute. Let's do it right now. So the complaint for declaratory, emergency, and permanent injunctive relief, you can see here, this was filed in the United States District Court for the Western District of Michigan. Once again, Donald Trump and co. against Jocelyn Benson, who is the Secretary of State over in Michigan. And they do a nice job of providing a summary at the beginning of their complaints, which I think is easy for us to read. So I'm going to read you some of the complaint about what their claims are. It's going to be very similar to the Pennsylvania claims, nothing particularly new here. But then I want to show you the actual legal terminology that they use in order to request relief. We're talking about a remedy. What is the remedy here for the Trump campaign's issue? How are they going to be satisfied if their lawsuit is successful? So this is from the opinion, but it's in italics. So when you're reading these types of complaints, or you're actually reading legal documents, what opinions will do is, because they know that these complaints are going to have a lot of public interest, so they will actually write sort of a summation at the start of the complaint, because these complaints are massive, like 80 pages. So they'll try to summarize it for you, and they're written quite well, so that it actually doesn't make much sense for us to go through all the nitty gritty. So I want to read you the layman's explanation, then I'm going to show you some of the more brain damage legal terms that we lawyers like to use. So this is from the lawsuit. It says, unfortunately, and this is not where it starts, so I just clipped out some things I thought were pertinent. It says Wayne County did not conduct and is not conducting this election as required by Michigan law. And I think Wayne County was actually one of the ones that Dr. Shiva was talking about yesterday. The Secretary of State Benson did not require Wayne County to follow the election code. In Michigan, there's a pretty severe, I would say intense election code that we're going to talk about. Among other things, the officials refused to permit the statutorily designated challengers, so they call them challengers, they don't call them watchers in Michigan, to observe the conduct of the election and the processing of the ballots. Some election officials predated ballots that were not eligible to be counted by altering the date the ballot was received. That's a big allegation here, right? And they're going to try to prove that in the lawsuit. Ballots that are ineligible to be counted will cancel out ballots Michigan eligible voters cast, effectively disenfranchising the votes cast by the citizens. The Michigan Code provides detailed rules for the conduct of the elections, and they do. I'm going to show you them. The Michigan Election Code should be uniformly and equally followed by all Michigan voters, so that all Michigan voters have an equal opportunity to cast a lawful ballot. So it goes on, and I'm not just going to keep reading. But it does say, we ask this court, so this is the remedy that they're talking about. We ask this court to enjoin the Michigan board and Wayne County from certifying any tally of ballots containing fraudulent or unlawfully cast ballots. So here, this is a little bit narrower than what we saw in Pennsylvania. Here, they're only talking about fraudulent or unlawfully cast ballots, which is a little bit of a narrower target. So in Pennsylvania, we saw basically bigger buckets, more encompassing attempts to throw out votes. Here, they're saying we're asking the court to enjoin the state from certifying any ballots received after Election Day and ballots that were processed when the designated challengers were excluded from a meaningful opportunity to observe the processing of ballots. Okay, that is a huge bucket. I want to pause on that. This is a really, 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 really big bucket, and I'm not so sure that they're going to be successful getting this done, but there are good arguments for it. So here's one more time. That includes ballots received after Election Day and ballots that were processed. So this means processed even before Election Day, ballots that came in even before the polls closed. But if they were just processed when statutorily designated challengers were excluded from a meaningful opportunity to observe. Huge bucket. Finally, ballots were tabulated with defective, malfunctioning machines, software must be excluded, and so on. Says this is a summary. So I want to show you this is a summary, is not part of the complaint, but it's provided for the convenience of the court of the parties. So really, really big bucket there. So here's what they're essentially saying. And this is why I think it's a bit of a stretch, but I'm going to show you another argument for why it may not be so much of a stretch, depending on how the judges rule, depending on how the Supreme Court interprets all this stuff. All right. Rudy Giuliani in this complaint is now saying that any ballot that was counted without their people there watching should be excluded. That's a huge number, okay? And the argument there is that the argument against that would be just because you weren't watching doesn't mean there was fraud taking place, right? You could have no watchers in the room and the election could have been run perfectly well. So what the court or what the Trump campaign is asking the court to do, it's basically any tabulation center that was processing ballots across the entire state that didn't have Donald Trump's people there should be invalidated. I don't think the courts are going to run with that. I really don't. First of all, it's really open to fraud, right? So specifically fraud by a campaign. Any campaign then could just go and say, oh, we didn't have watchers there. We didn't have any challengers there. We didn't have anybody standing there to watch the votes. So we can't know that they're valid. They should be thrown out. Well, it's kind of the campaign's responsibility to go and put people in those places. And so here, that's where the evidence is going to be difficult. There's going to be a bunch of people who represent the government who say, no, we let your people in all the time. You're making this stuff up. And the Trump's people are going to say, no, they didn't let us in. They kicked us out. And so they're going to battle over the evidence there. Who is right on that? And if Trump's people are right and they were actively, maliciously, intentionally excluded from the tabulation process, what's the remedy there? Is the court going to just say, you're right, that tabulation center, because they were processing, I don't know, a few 100,000 ballots without your people there, we're going to throw out all those votes, or we're going to require them to do it again. Is a court going to go to that extent? I really, really doubt it. I think they're going to try to craft a resolution, or they may just say, hey, it's your own fault for not having your representatives there. So the idea that they're going to just invalidate huge swaths of voters just because they weren't watching doesn't mean, I don't think a court's going to do it, quite frankly, right? It's like playing a game with somebody and you get up to get a drink and they move a piece on the board and you come back and you say, I didn't see you move. And they say, well, I just moved my pawn right up there. And you say, yeah, but I didn't see it. So we're going to need to redo the game. We're going to need to modify this whole thing. I don't know that that's the best analogy, but just because you didn't see something happen doesn't mean that there's fraud involved. And I think that's what the court is going to do. Rather than just saying, oh yeah, you're right, you didn't have somebody standing there to watch this all happen. You're right. We're going to invalidate 100,000 ballots and we're going to do it again. I don't think that's going to fly. Now, that being said, if they were maliciously excluded from the process, if there's some level of malfeasance that the Trump campaign can prove that this was a coordinated deal, that there were a number of people with lists. I've seen some alleged lists that say, Corey Lewandowski cannot be admitted. All sorts of Republican higher echelon individuals can't be admitted into the building. Okay, that's a coordinated, organized, structured denial and systemic violation of the law. And so if they can come in and prove that there was this big cabal of individuals who wanted to basically disenfranchise them from monitoring the election, that's of consequence. But if they just go in and say, look, we just didn't get a chance to watch this thing, that is not going to fly. Now, the Michigan code is pretty intense. I mean, it's pretty detailed, and they actually have a lot of qualifications and a lot of rules around these challengers and around these individuals who would be watching the election take place. And this is where I think there may be a good argument. Michigan, the argument would go that Michigan is so serious about these challengers. They've ingrained it into their laws so deeply and so consequently that the denial of access into those rooms is a huge violation, right? The law is so clear. It's so important to us. The fact that they violated it means the harm is massive, and the remedy needs to match the harm. That's how you get equal levels there. Okay. They would be saying, it would be like me going in and saying, yeah, I wasn't driving a Toyota Camry. I was driving, a brand new Tesla. They ruined my Tesla. I want compensation for that. Not the other way around. It's more equal. But we don't know how the judges are going to rule on that. So let's take a look at what the law says about these challengers, and then we'll do a little bit more analysis. So in Michigan, and I don't want to read all of this to you, but I just want to kind of fly through it and show you what they're talking about. So all of this is regarding the challengers. Michigan codes provides challenges have the following rights and responsibilities. And here it says shall, okay? In legal terms, that's a big one. Shall means it's mandatory. In law, shall means there's no choice. If a judge shall do something or a defense attorney shall do something, it means you do it. If it's discretionary, that word changes to may. Challengers may have the following rights. No, that's not what it says. It says shall. And so this is where a lot of these textualist arguments and these originalist arguments are going to come into play. And this is why people are concerned about Amy Coney Barrett being on the Supreme Court, because if this stuff bubbles up there, the originalists, the textualists may take a look at this and say, look, this is what the law says. The law says shall. You guys didn't do it. Therefore, you're in violation of the law. All those votes are gone. Is the Supreme Court going to do that? I really don't think so. But they could. I mean, there's an argument for it because Michigan law is so specific and because it affords these challengers, these watchers, so many rights. And it's not equivocating about that. It's very clear. Challengers shall have the following. An election challenger provided with a space within a polling place where they can observe the election and each person applying to vote. So that's a shall. They shall be in there. They shall. An election challenger must be allowed the opportunity to inspect the poll books as ballots are issued, and so on. It goes on. It says that a person must be allowed to observe in a manner in which the duties are being performed. It must be authorized to challenge the voting rights. An election challenger is authorized to challenge an election procedure that is not being properly performed. So they're monitoring a lot more than just standing over somebody's shoulder and checking to see if they're putting ballots into the machine correctly. An election challenger may bring to an election inspector's attention any of the following: improper handling of ballots, a violation of a regulation, campaigning and fundraising taking place there. They may remain present during the canvass of the votes and until the statement of returns is duly and signed and made. And it's not done there. It goes on. They may examine each ballot as it's being counted. An election challenger may keep records of votes cast and other election procedures as the challenger desires. An election challenger may observe the recording of the absent voter ballots on voting machines, and so on. It's a lot. There's a lot of rights there. The Michigan law is very, very favorable towards these watchers. It gives them, all the way through J, a number of different rights and responsibilities. The legislature adopted these provisions to prevent and deter vote fraud. Right? So the key thing that Donald Trump's campaign is complaining about, this statute was put in place to prevent and deter vote fraud. So now they're going to be saying that the whole reason that this statute exists is to help us ensure that elections are done competently. They violated not only the specifics of the law, not only these different rules that, they can record absent ballots, they can keep records and all that stuff, but they're also undermining the intent of the law. So procedurally, they're violating it by keeping our people out from counting. But they're also just undermining the entire purpose of this thing, which is to prevent and deter fraud. It requires that Michigan elections are transparent, and they want to assure the public confidence in the outcome, no matter how close the final tally may be. It says here, Michigan values the important role challengers perform in assuring the transparency and the integrity of the elections. Now, this is not law, okay? This is Trump's lawyers. It says, for example, Michigan law provides it is a felony punishable by up to 2 years in state prison for any person to threaten or intimidate a challenger who is performing any activity described under Michigan law. Right? So you could easily make the argument that, hey, you're Trump's people. They kept you out of the room. Michigan really values this stuff because they've got A through J of different rights and responsibilities and different things that a Michigan poll watcher, or challenger as they call them, can do. And because they were excluded, this just shakes the foundation of the election to its core. And it can no longer be considered valid anymore. And so now they're really doing a pretty good job in my mind of actually making the claim, the harm of the claim, be such a slap in the face. Michigan has these rules. The rules were clearly violated. And not only procedurally did they kick us out, but they did it in a way to promote and encourage fraud, which goes to the very heart of the entire law and to the entire statute. And it's persuasive, right? Now you have the harm and the remedy that is now going to be disqualifying a lot more votes. In this case, they're talking about hundreds of thousands. Now it kind of feels like that makes a little bit more sense, like it matters a little bit more, right? If you took my first argument where it's just Donald Trump's people saying, hey, we didn't get to watch anything in there, that's rude. That's not enough. But when you go through and you have all of these very detailed harms, and then you have, the prayer for relief, it kind of feels like it's a little bit more on par. But we're going to see what the judges have to say. So this is where we're actually talking about the prayer for relief. Let me run through this quickly because it's a lot of legalese, but I read you what they're asking for. This is literally the final page or a couple pages, if I remember correctly, of what they're asking the court to do. So what are they asking the judge to officially sign off on? And here we can see this is what it looks like. So President Trump and Vice President Pence campaign asked this court to enter declaratory judgment in favor and injunctive relief. So they want a declaration in their favor and they want injunction. So they want to stop the government from doing things. They want an order directing Secretary Benson to not certify the election results until they've been verified and confirmed. Okay, we already talked about that. They want an order prohibiting Wayne County Board of County Canvassers from certifying any votes that include fraudulent or unlawful ballots tabulated using Dominion software. There it is. Okay, we see Dominion now popping up. We don't want any ballots tabulated that were using Dominion in order to get in there. Ballots tabulated using Dominion. We've got any ballots received after Election Day, so anything that came in after November 3rd, pretty standard claim there. Any ballots that were verified or counted when challengers were excluded from the room. Huge bucket there, okay? Huge bucket. That's where these hundreds of thousands of votes are coming from, because you can just imagine that they're just running ballots through the tabulation machines. If Donald Trump's people are not in there, it must be thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of ballots. We've got an order saying that Wayne County is meaningfully not really pertinent there. We've got an order directing challengers be allowed to be physically present with a meaningful opportunity to observe. We've got an order directing the County Board of Canvassers and the Board of State Canvassers to be present and to attain and review the video of unattended remote ballot drop boxes and so on. And they also want reasonable attorney's fees, of course. Filed by Mark Thor. Mark Thor, what a name, over at True North Law. A couple good names there for Mark. So very, very interesting claims there, right? And pretty broad. And it's not just going to stop there with these lawsuits, because now we see that the Michigan state senator and several of them actually are asking for a lot more to be done. So we'll wrap up with this final letter. I think this is all that we've got. And then we'll jump into the live chat, because I got some super chats coming in that I've got to get to. So here we have, let's see, we got Michigan State Senator Lana Thies, who actually submitted a letter over on November 13th. So that's interesting. That's tomorrow. And she's saying that sending over to Jocelyn Benson. So as you are aware, the general election is currently being conducted in the state of Michigan, generated a lot of interest, right? A lot of interest. And they're saying here, with a record number of 5.4 million Michiganders participating in the process. And every citizen deserves to have faith in the integrity of the election process and its outcome. It is our responsibility as elected public servants to assure the people, and so on. Okay, no fraud, no wrongdoing, none of that stuff. And it goes on. First, Antrim County caused a serious glitch. This issue was identified, observers flagged it, and quite frankly, it's just one of 47 counties that use the same software. This is particularly concerning when at least one other Secretary of State, especially in Texas, refused to certify the Dominion software because they were not safe from fraudulent or unauthorized manipulation. This raises questions. Second, there are allegations that election officials critically mishandled numerous ballots, and then we have this whole list. Ineligible ballots, same batches multiple times, poll workers to backdate absentee ballots, counted late ballots after illicitly predating them, used false information to process, such as using incorrect or false birthdays, inserted new names into the QVF and recorded these, accepted ballots deposited in drop boxes after the deadline, duplicated ballots illegally, counted ballots even though the voter's name did not appear. And it goes on and on and on and on, right? Ordered to not certify, and it just keeps going. Third, there are allegations of unsecured ballots at the TCF, which is the tabulation center. 40,000 ballots arrived early Wednesday morning from out-of-state vehicles. They all said the ballots had already arrived. They were all allegedly for one candidate. There are allegations of illegal and official intimidation and interference with lawful election challengers and poll watchers, talking about harassment, unequal treatment of challengers, refusal to record challenges. It just goes on and on and on, right? So a pretty big letter signed by two senators here that are state senators for the state of Michigan. It says each of these allegations is backed up by sworn affidavits of over 100 Michigan citizens, real people, willing to face legal consequences to their lives and livelihoods to stand by their assertions. Okay, and that is evidence. A lot of people don't want to acknowledge that, but these affidavits are evidence. So these claims deserve the full attention. As such, due to directly to these issues, we are requesting a full audit to be conducted of the 2020 general election prior to the certification of any results. So the same types of remedies they're requesting. We must take every step possible to ensure that integrity and accuracy. They want an audit. They want verification of the law. And any fraudulent process votes or unfair obstacles placed in front of a legal poll will disenfranchise the voters regardless of their political affiliation. Every legal vote must be counted, is what they say. So, things are moving forward. Now we've got some state senators in different states actually saying they want full audits, they want more verification, and they want to see what happened here, which I don't think is bad. As I've made the point many times here, more review, more discussion is better. All right, so let's get to some of the super chats. Let me pull some of this stuff up, and somebody sent me a question I need to look up, and we pulled it up here. Okay, this is a massive statute, and so somebody here, James Clark, is saying, me again, in Arizona, when a ballot is mailed, is that by passing the precincts and not subject to Arizona Revised Statute 1602? So how is count verified in Arizona? It's a great question. And to be honest, James, I know you've got two super chats in here. I would love to answer this question sort of offline because look, let me show you this statute real quick. So I just pulled it up. I just did a search as you sent that message over. Let me show you this thing. All right. And I have not read it. I'll be honest. This is very, very long. Look at this thing. A lot of detail here. So I don't want to just spitball an answer for you. I now have this pulled up and saved. I know you've given us two very nice, very generous super chats. So if you want to send me an email, if you want to actually reach out to me, I will answer this question independently. Send an email to tips. Send an email, or I'll just I'll make the commitment to you that I will read this statute, and then we will get you an answer tomorrow. Thank you for that, but it is a big statute, and I don't specifically know. I kind of understand what you're asking, but I'll read it and I'll have a better answer for you on the next show. I promise that. All right. So Miss Faith, hold me accountable, please. Hold me accountable to that because I'm going to look like an idiot if I get on the program tomorrow and I don't have an answer for Mr. James Clark, but we will. All right, so a couple others that came in. We have one from Daniel McVillan, I think. He says, I see intel coming our way with how Trump just stopped anyone from investigating and China's military is going to come into play for the electoral votes. That's from Donald. Thank you very much, Donald. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for that nice generosity. We have one from Charles Reed, who says, I have a question. Is the vote a matter of public record? Might I go into Oakland and count the ballots myself? I do not care how long it takes me, 10 years, but for real, why not? Show me the ballots. So that's a great question, and I think I don't think you can just walk on in and actually get access to them, but I would imagine that many of these states need more poll watchers. They need more volunteers. I know at least in Arizona, there was a call for volunteers. Some people who are part of a men's group that I'm in who are, older and they have some extra time, they were volunteering and reading the manuals and all that stuff. So if you had the time and you wanted to go, apply to be a ballot watcher or to go join in one of these recounts or something like that, I would imagine that you could get in there, but I highly doubt that they're going to give you access today after this election because they have their hands full. There's a lot of hands in the pot right now, as it were. So I'm not real sure you're going to get access to that. But the long and short of, the other part of the question is whether or not they, the vote is, your vote is secret, right? You don't want people to know how you voted. We already have AOC who is threatening to put a bunch of people on different lists just for having conversations for some bizarre reason. But people want to protect that. They don't want to put that stuff out there. That's why a lot of people have concerns about voting. About donating for candidates, because a lot of that stuff is public record, according to the FEC. And people don't want to get, imagine if you're a Trump voter right now, or you donated $10,000 to Donald Trump and they put you on a list somewhere, and now they're going to, beat down your business or do whatever, especially if Donald Trump wins. Oh my goodness. Fast forward on this thing. What if 4 weeks from now, we're looking at President Donald Trump again, and your name's on a list somewhere? It's not good. So people want their voting information kept secret, and I think that's pretty reasonable. We have another super chat. Thank you, Adam S. He says, excellent attorney, excellent show, London, England. How cool is that? Thank you so much, Adam. Thanks for sending that over. Pretty neat. I've never actually been to London, England. I've been to a number of different places in Europe. I've been to Paris and Germany, spent some time in Munich, Italy, traveled to China, actually, visited the Great Wall. So I've been around, been very fortunate in that regard, and really enjoyed it, but I've just never made it to London. But maybe I will look you up when I get out there. Thank you so much for that. We have Jacqueline Lutker, who just gave us a super chat. No question on that. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. And then we've got some other ones. We've got Kenneth Slayer, who says, what happens if they destroy ballots to prevent them from being counted, like Brenda Snipes, D, did for Debbie Wasserman Schultz in her contest with Tim Canova, D, in 2016? That's from Kenneth Slayer. Very nice super chat on that. Thanks, Kenneth. So this is important, and I think this may be an issue, but again, I don't know what the remedy is. So one of the concerns that I saw, I forget what state it was. I'm getting them all. They're all kind of running together right now. But there was a headline, and I actually bookmarked it, and so I'll look into it. But there are allegations now that when you run for public office or you're on a public board, there are a lot of different states and cities that have transparency laws and basically open meeting rules and things, so that when you're doing stuff, it has to be public record, right? And they want to maintain things. They've got, I can't think of the name of them. I can't think of the name of the word right now, but you have these policies that mean that you have to keep things for a certain amount of time. We have them here at the firm. We keep files for a certain amount of time because the state bar requires us to do that. It's the right thing to do anyway. So our clients, always know we have it, but there are a lot of states that will require record-keeping rules. And in one of the states, apparently, all of the secret ballots are gone, or at least that was a headline I saw. I don't know how true that is or whether that is accurate or fake news or whatever, but that would be a problem. So if you had, like in Pennsylvania, for example, my understanding is, in order for a ballot to be valid, you got to take the ballot and put it in a secret envelope and then mail the secret envelope. The secret envelope will then go into the actual mail envelope, and if it's not in that order, that ballot doesn't count, and it's a secret ballot. And so they wanted that to be the situation, so that when you mailed it and a poll worker opened it, they would then separate the ballot out and give it to a different group of people who process the ballot. and then they wouldn't know who the originator was because there's an arm's length separation there. Well, the issue is, what if they just took all of those secret envelopes, which is a part of the official document because it's necessary, it's written in the law. What if all of those secret ballots or those secret envelopes have been thrown out? Well, that's in violation of the local record rules, so that you got to keep all of those documents for 2 years. Well, they threw out a pretty important component of that. What's the remedy for that? The harm, I don't know. Is the harm so severe that you just throw out all of the ballots that were put in that separate bucket? We're going to need more evidence on that. But it is a good question, and somebody else has thought of it. Somebody else has said, well, wait a minute. If we're going to go do an audit in Georgia, have they already shredded all the ballots? It's going to make it hard for us to do an audit. I'm not saying that's what happened in Georgia, but if something like that did happen, it would invalidate the audit, and it would even make things worse, right? More people would be coming out and saying, what do you mean you just shredded the evidence? The only thing we wanted to look at, the only thing that is a paper trail that connects a voter to a vote is now gone, or you deleted half the part, half of the package, the secret envelopes, could be a big problem. And I think it's not a bad point either. We have another super chat from Michael Crosby. He says, are you a traveling man? Well, I was. I haven't done any traveling this year, unfortunately. I had some big plans to kind of take some time and go kind of explore a little bit. Didn't get to do that, unfortunately, but we'll get back out there. All this stuff will calm down with the coronavirus. The bedlam from the election will calm down maybe next year. Great question, though. Thanks for asking. All right. Insightly Digest with a super chat. Insightly Digest says, why don't the ballot counting facilities require video cameras on each volunteer like at casinos or bank tellers? It's a great question. And, this is something that I learned a lot about this election. So specifically in Arizona, in Maricopa County, they have cameras. And we actually, in our Discord channel, which if you're not already over on the Discord channel, hop on over there. It's a lot of fun. We actually shared a link that Maricopa County has webcams. So you can actually go into the tabulation center and just click around the different webcams. And I posted a screenshot of a bunch of people who were on their cell phones in there. And this was right around the time that Arizona had all the protesters who were outside the tabulation centers, chanting, count the votes and all that stuff. And so everybody inside, I was like, they're not counting anything. They're doing the same thing we're all doing. They're all on Twitter, just tweeting away going, what the heck is going on? So there are, I think, movements in that direction. So in Arizona, we have, our tabulation center has cameras. Now you can't really zoom in. It's, it's like 480p, 1990 webcam quality, but it's trending in the right direction. And after this election, you may see some pretty serious reforms across the board. I mean, it wouldn't be really hard to, protect a poll worker's privacy and sort of and camerize their workstation, right? So you could have a camera that's monitoring the ballots. You could have a camera that's, kind of monitoring everything around them. And as they're processing the ballots, as they're taking it from one area and bringing it around, watching the whole process without necessarily watching that person. And so you could just kind of see where their hands are and what the ballots look like. And, I think that may be a good solution, quite frankly, because we got coronavirus. We don't want a lot of people around. And now we can just sort of watch all this stuff happen digitally. And it would be great if all this stuff was broadcasted online, because from what we have seen from the internet, just in the sleuthing going on, just gathering up all this data, it's amazing what they're able to do, what people are able to watch and see. And even on that election night, I was watching people open ballots for probably an hour, or they weren't actually doing much. They were kind of just like floating around, but they were doing some work here and there. But I was watching because I was going to be that guy who was going to nab them, but they didn't do anything. They were all tweeting like the rest of us, but it was a good time. All right, good question from Insightly Digest. We have Jacqueline Luker, who says, so Senator here in Oklahoma said he was going to step in and make Trump give Biden intel. Okay, that's interesting. I don't know how he's going to propose to do that, because Biden is not anything right now. Biden is just a candidate who is projected to win the electoral vote, right? But there is no office of the president-elect. He's technically, he hasn't. We went through some of the rules yesterday from the General Services Agency, or the GSA, whatever they're called. They have to confirm from the Electoral College that he is going to be transitioning into being the president, and then that unleashes a floodgate of transition resources in terms of money and background checks and security clearances and all that stuff. So there's a structure in place in order to push, to make this transition happen. And I don't know how a senator from Oklahoma is involved in that. They could go and I guess beat the drum with the GSA and tell them, you got to certify this and start the transition. But what are they going to do? The law says that this gets settled on December 14th. So the New York Times, CNN, Washington Post, all these people can go into hysterics about it, but the law is pretty dang clear. And we went through this yesterday. We went through a lot of Biden's response. I was wondering, what are his people going to do? What are his lawyers going to do? We've got a lot of Trump lawyers. We've got a lot of lawsuits flying from the Trump campaign. We've got a lot of people on the internet who are sleuthing around and digging up all this dirt. But the Democrats have largely just been operating like it's business as usual, even though it really isn't. And I think that's to their detriment. I think they would be very well served to start fighting back a little bit. Go find some states where they think that they lost by a small margin. Trump's claiming fraud all over the place. Maybe they should claim some fraud and go investigate themselves, or they should bring their own expert witnesses or their own data scientists or analytical people to refute all these claims. I think we as a society are stronger if that happens. Our elections are safer and more secure if both these sides can just go in and battle it out. As a result, everything will get better. It's going to feel really bad. It's going to feel gross. It's going to feel like, that guy's a loser. Trump's a loser. He refuses to concede. The media is ruining America by being too presumptuous about who the next president's going to be. They're not letting the process play out. They're encouraging fraud, right? Both of these things are going on. But when we pit ambition against ambition, when we take one person's motivation and pit it right directly against another's, we all kind of get a little bit better. That's the beauty of capitalism. That's the beauty of America. You've got two competitors who are fighting to make a better widget. Everybody benefits as a result of that, and including the people who lose the battle, right? Because they shouldn't be in that marketplace. They shouldn't be playing that game. They should go do something else and let the better, the better product survive, the better argument survive, the better idea, the better legal challenge, the better theory. We want those to survive, and the only way you can do that is by putting them in the Coliseum and letting them battle it out. So we'll see what that Oklahoma senator is in fact able to do. We have another super chat from Jack Torrance. Once again, no questions over there, but thank you very much, Jack Torrance. Appreciate it. Thank you for being here. And it looks like there's a cup of coffee right there in that super chat, which I will surely indulge in. Thank you so much for that. All right, let's see what else we got. We'll take a few more, and then we will hop off here. So we have Earl Robinson, who says, I'm from Nottingham in the UK. I believe President Trump won the presidential election. Another person from the UK. How cool. He says, I hope my American brothers and sisters stand strong and expose the Democrats' criminality. MAGA 2020. Thanks for being here, my friend. That's awesome. A couple people over in Europe. How cool. I mean, very, very, very neat. It's humbling. It's kind of mind blowing. It's wild that this technology exists and we can do this, but having a lot of fun. I'm glad you're here. So thanks for that. All right. We've got John Drake, who says, are you aware that 3 federal Supreme Court justices are from Bush's 2000 legal team in the Bush versus Gore case, and Trump appointed 2 of them? I find it laughable no one noticed this sooner. So 3 federal Supreme Court justices are from Bush's 2000 legal team in the Bush versus Gore case. I did not know that. No, that would be interesting. Very, very interesting if that is accurate. So are you saying, is that Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, they were all on his team? Because that would leave Alito and Thomas. Thomas certainly has been on the court longer than that. I'd have to look that up. It's very interesting. All right, we've got one from Antonio E., who says there's a video of PA election board disobeying PA court order, can send to you. And PA confessed in court to obstructing the GOP, tried to rationalize it in court about COVID. What's in dispute about this? Yeah, it's a good point. I haven't seen any of that evidence, but I would like to see it. All right, we've got one from Kevin McCrary, who says, you better brush up on your rules on the Electoral College. They aren't bound to vote. Was the respective with how the respective states voted. Watch Jerome Corsi explain it all. Well, I've never made the argument there, Kevin, that they can't do that. They can't do that. And I think tomorrow I may talk about the two different roads to the White House. One is by invalidating votes, and one is by winning the legislatures. So they could actually just forget about the votes, and they could say, we don't need to invalidate anything. I mean, we're just not even going to challenge that. We're just going to say the election was fraudulent. I don't care how many votes there were. Donald Trump is down by 280,000 votes. Who cares? We're not even going to file these lawsuits anywhere. We're just going to go and we're just going to convince all of the Republicans. And if they're right, if Trump really did win and there really are a majority of Americans who really do want him to be president, okay, so think about that. The premise from Donald Trump's team would have to be that they didn't actually lose. They actually did win. And, it's not 75 million to 71 or whatever the final numbers are looking like, which is not done yet. It's actually that Donald Trump had a landslide victory. And because he actually has the momentum of the real American people, the people who, who everyone's saying doesn't exist, he would have to believe that they do exist and that there's enough momentum there for them to go and put pressure on the Republican legislatures in these different battleground states and just convince them to have their electors not vote for the main, or, not vote the way the state voted. So basically ask them to break their faith, to become faithless electors, and then go and change and modify their votes over to Donald Trump. So I agree with you. That is possible, and you can do that. I think it's very unlikely, very, very unlikely, because I think that in order for it to work, they would have to show a massive fraud on a level that would really amp up enough Americans to support that. Now it comes down to legitimacy. Donald Trump would have to show that the election was ultimately illegitimate and that it should be thrown out because it carries no water. I think it's a huge, huge order. It's a tall order for Americans to just throw out the entire election or for their state legislators to do it. So I think that if you win one, you probably win both. If you have enough evidence to show that there was significant fraud taking place, that's probably going to help you win in court. And it's probably also going to help you win back in the states. And it doesn't necessarily have to be with faithless electors. It would just be, you would convince the state and you would say, look, we saw this in court. A court judge ruled, yeah, Rudy Giuliani was right. There's 200,000 ballots that were totally fraudulent. We need to do an audit of this election. Michigan redoes the audit. They find those 200,000 ballots. It does flip because Trump's only down 140,000. He wins the state of Michigan after an official audit and recount, and he doesn't need to go the other way, the back door, through the Republican legislature. But he could. And your point is right that he could. He doesn't necessarily have to go in one way. He can go another way. But I don't think it's I would say practically feasible. Good question though. All right, let's see. We have somebody. Okay, we've got. You're very knowledgeable. You should join Trump's legal team. That comes from Ramon Arias. Enough Americans know this was a huge fraud, and we will force the government to throw out these fake votes. That comes from Kelly Nunez. Ray Baldwin says, explain to me how you're such a great presidential candidate that you helped flip a bunch of House seats, get 7 million more votes than your previous election, and lose the presidential race. Yeah, that is a very interesting point, right? The idea was, at least according to a lot of the polls before the election, which I don't think were actually supposed to be descriptive. I don't think they were describing what they were seeing. I think they were supposed to be more prescriptive or normative. So they want to go and actually help kind of shape the narrative. And the narrative was Trump's going to get blown out across the board. They're going to retake the House, extend their lead in the House, retake the Senate, and then just crush it with the presidency. None of that stuff came true. They actually lost seats in the House. Senate's probably going to stay in Republican control. Pretty sure of that. And then Donald Trump's making his allegations and some of them, kind of hold a little bit of water. So we'll see where that goes. But it was supposed to be the opposite of that. And so the explanation here now today is that, well, people like Republicans, they just don't like Donald Trump. And I'm not real sure that I buy it. So it feels like a disconnect type of a case where, the results show one thing, but the evidence kind of feels like it shows something different. It does. It does. There were Republican gains in the House. Republicans are going to go hold on to the Senate, and the polls were dramatically wrong across the board. It wasn't even close. Nate Silver was dead wrong across the board. So you're right. It doesn't feel consistent, but that is not enough to throw out 200,000 votes. Good point, though. All right. Let's see. Never Trust a Lawyer says, hi, Rob. Can you give us an update on Faith's pay raise? Thanks. Yeah. Good question. I don't have a pithy, witty comment on that, but I will tell you Faith is invaluable. There is no amount of money that I could pay that would make Faith, that would be worth it. She's very, very valuable, and we love her to death. Thank you, Miss Faith. She's right back there doing a great job. All right, let's see what else we have. We have Brian Williamson, who says, during my Annenberg challenge from 1995 to 2001, during that period, Obama was an Illinois state senator who wasn't widely known. General Biochemistry says Dr. Shiva shows analysis of Michigan votes that show a distinct algorithm change the votes from Trump to Biden. So General Biochemistry, we talked about that yesterday. At the end of the show yesterday, I actually don't know if that is on YouTube. I think it is. I don't know if it cut me off at some point. But we had a YouTube problem yesterday, which was a major bummer. I think they knew that I was going to get on and just, break the case. And so they just cut down the whole site. But we're back. All right. We have Andrew says, does Section 11 of Act 77 in PA nullify all mail-in ballots? I don't know right off the top of my head. I'd have to look into that a little bit further, but I would say that that's up for the court to decide. We haven't had a decision on that yet from the Supreme Court, but I'm sure they are going to. For Skits and Giggles says, I am from Canada and I watched the election until 2 a.m. listening to commentators. I saw in real time Dems cheat because they stopped the count, which is unprecedented. I saw that too. I was awake. We did a 5-hour live stream here with many of you on election night. 5 hours. It was a lot of fun, a little bit exhausting, but we saw that too. When we were going, we stopped at 10 p.m. Arizona time. This is, I think, before daylight savings, maybe after. I don't remember. But we started to see this kind of stuff go sort of trend that way. Donald Trump looked way up at the end of election night. We woke up the next day after all the 4 a.m. ballots came in, and he was losing. It was a surreal night. Very weird. All right. We have somebody from Ethiopia is in the house. Thanks for being here, David. He says, defund the media. Defund the media says the election was fraught with suppression, over-encumbrance of mail-in ballots, too many, quote, glitches, and perhaps whatever tools are in the kit of election fraud. Jacqueline Luker with another super chat. That's a couple from you today. Thanks, Jacqueline. Appreciate that. She says, what happens if court hearings go past January 20th? So there is a deadline. I think there's a deadline. It's in the Constitution, or it might be in the U.S. Code. I don't remember when the deadline is, but eventually, if they can't figure it out, it goes over to the House of Representatives, and I think each representative gets one vote, or each state gets one vote. I think that's how it works. It's been a while since I read that, but we may be there. I may be reading all this stuff. And I'm not sure that we're going to need. I don't think it's actually going to get to that point. I'm going to imagine that this is all mostly settled by December 14th. Donald Trump may never formally concede, but once these other triggers come into play, then the process is going to start. Without him, and the thought that he's going to stay in the White House and they're going to need the military to come, throw him out, or it's going to be a coup. He's going to try to seize control of the government. That stuff sounds like massive hysteria to me. I truthfully think the courts are going to work it out. I think it's all settled by December 14th. And, if it's not, then we have a whole slew of other problems to deal with, because that means our country is entering totally uncharted territory. There's no legal precedent for it, no Supreme Court cases, no rules, no laws. It would be mostly bedlam in my mind. So I'm really hoping that it doesn't go that far. I don't think that it will either. But it's a good question, and thank you so much, Jacqueline. Very, very nice of you. Very kind for those super chats and great questions. Thanks so much. So we also have Jerry D. Koenig, who says no economic reset, no enslaving the American people, no chip, no scripted plandemic. We have Richard Burns, who says Joe will be arrested for treason. I'm not sure that'll happen, but we'll see. Charles Reed with a super chat says, can you say what the 79 days of hell means? I don't know. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means. 79. Can you say what the 79 days of hell means? I don't know what that means. I would be very curious as to what that means. I hope I didn't say something. Somebody else asked me a question and I responded with something that was, borderline questionable. So I get a little bit concerned when I just sort of repeat things that don't make a lot of sense. But thanks, Charles Reed, for the super chat. I do appreciate it. All right, we have a couple more questions. Zulu says, you'll know it's coming if generals start getting fired. And Alex Jones. Okay, so Miss Faith looked that up for me. She said, Alex Jones predicts 79 days of hell after the 2020 election. Wow. He was on the Joe Rogan show. I started listening to that. The Joe Rogan, Alex Jones podcasts are the best. This one was not as good as the last one. The last one, I think it was like 5 hours of Alex Jones and Joe Rogan drinking whiskey and smoking pot and talking about space aliens transporting from other dimensions. It was one of the most fascinating podcast I've ever listened to, and it was a lot of fun. So if you haven't checked that out, definitely check that out. I will go look up what the 79 days of hell looks like after the election. Hugh Mungus says chances of civil war if Trump gets elected. Listen, I don't think there's any possibility of a civil war. I really don't. And the reason I say that is because I think that I've talked about this previously on the show, but I think there's kind of this layer of security. I call it sort of a corporate safety blanket. So down here, sort of on the low level, it's all of us people. It's all of us little peons running around here, beating each other over the head over the election, fighting each other over taxes and abortion and gay rights and environmentalism and all that stuff. And it's a lot of noise down here. But on a higher level, you have this little corporate, capitalist, money-making ambition that just kind of is a nice little safety blanket that just kind of settles down on everybody. Just kind of keeps us nice and calm. So when it starts to look like the country's going to split apart and we're all going to start murdering each other in the streets, good old safety blanket comes in, and nobody wants that to happen. Nobody on either side wants that to happen, right? There's too much profit motive. There's too much incentives. There's too much things to build and too much stuff to do. And so I think that as a structure, even though we have a lot of division on a lot of lower levels, Democrats and Republicans and Antifa versus the cops or whatever it is. And, it feels like we're all sort of disconnected. Everybody still wants running water. Everybody still wants the grocery store to work. Everybody wants to be able to fill their car up with gas and hop on a plane and order something from Amazon and have it delivered, right? Nobody wants to give all of those luxuries up in the sake of a cause, even if they hate Donald Trump. Now, there's going to be a small subsection of Americans or whomever they are who are angry, and they're going to take to the streets, and we're going to see a bunch of Trump supporters doing a march on Washington, I think, this Saturday. But are those people going to, risk going to jail or risk being alienated from their family or, literally march in the streets with guns and firearms? I don't think that's likely, because people like their Netflix. They like their big screen TVs. They like just a nice, kind of simple, quiet life. So I'm not real sure that it is going to explode into chaos, madness, and bedlam. All right, we have a nice post from Keaton L. He says, wrote about you in my homework post this week for my political communication class. Hopefully some of my classmates check you out and learn a thing or two. How cool is that? Thank you, Keaton. That's awesome. I would appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, that's very cool. I think what we're doing here is a lot of fun. I think it's useful. My only goal here is to try to add a little bit of value and, kind of move the conversation a little bit further in a different way, from a different perspective. And we like to do some mental gymnastics on this program, and we have fun doing it. So thank you so much for that. And I hope you get a good grade on that. Hopefully your teacher, your professor, doesn't come over, watch the show, and then boot you out of class. I would feel very bad if that happened. So thanks for that nice comment. I'm glad that you passed that along, and thanks for being here, Keaton. We have Roma Sumar, who says, MSM is misinforming the public big time. Are there any repercussions for that, or are they protected under the First Amendment? So it's a great question, Roma, and it's something I've given a lot of thought to, and I think they're totally protected. I think they're entitled to this, and I think they have some pretty good justification for it, right? From what it sounds like right now, if you go through and you look at all the votes, Joe Biden is ahead. Right now, the mainstream media, in my mind, is certainly creating this little bubble around people. There's no question about it, and it's very persuasive, and I think it's very effective. But if I went on the Washington Post today, or I think the New York Times today, and they're all talking about the next administration, they've already moved past it. They're hardly even talking about Trump anymore and any of his challenges. They were originally, but it's now sort of faded away into the darkness, because they're already sort of conditioning people that the election is long over. There's no possibility of any reversal, and it's a foregone conclusion, which may ultimately be true, but we're just not there yet. And so in my mind, it's a little bit disingenuous, but they have a good basis for it. They have a good argument, because technically Joe Biden is up in the polls, right? Or is up in the states. People, according to the votes, which you may think, I may think, many people may think, or may not think, that there may be some irregularities there, or even outright fraud. But the numbers are what the numbers are, and so they can lean on those numbers because they're legitimate until they're proven illegitimate. So when they come out and they make these claims that there's no fraud or any of those things, the Supreme Court cases provide a lot of protection for your First Amendment rights, and a lot of protections for the press. Freedom of the press is almost its own little unique subset in constitutional law because there are additional rules and protections for them, like whistleblower protections and all sorts of stuff. So if they can make a good case for it, I think they're totally protected. It's really up to the consumer to make educated and informed decisions about that, right? It's up to the people to wake up and start thinking about this stuff with a little bit more coherence rather than just sitting in front of CNN and being programmed 24 hours a day with madness and hysteria, which is what they're selling. They want to rile you up. They want to get you angry. They want to incentivize you to go out there and, go to war with each other over this stuff because that keeps you tuning in. Every time you tune in and you press that button, you get a nice little pellet that comes out in the form of moral outrage and indignation. And remember, a lot of people in the world, that is kind of all they have. They haven't sort of oriented their life to do something that's productive and useful, and they just live in this world of anger and tension. And they're out there to go change the world and fight for causes and stuff because they may not have a lot of inner self-worth, so they want to go be a part of causes, and they want to turn on Fox News or CNN and just get riled up, get very angry about this stuff because it gives them that feeling of righteous indignation. Have you ever felt that when you're just angry and it almost feels good, like you're just growling, but it almost feels good? And that's what a lot of these news agencies want to do to people. It's not the best thing for the country. And so I think, to your point, a lot of people need to wake up a little bit. And, that's where we're trying to come in with this program and just have reasonable dialogue, talk about the issues, talk about the evidence, and see if we can come together and, and reach some conclusions. And they're going to be wrong. Some are going to be right. And we're just going to have a lot of fun and a lot of mental exercise doing it as we go through it. All right. Jacqueline Luker, another one, says, thank you for all your information. Do you see yourself, Trump, coming out on top of this? I hope so. So I think it's a little bit too early to tell on that, quite frankly. If we fast forward 2 weeks from now and nothing has really changed, if this evidence is the same, then it's not going to look good for Trump. But it's still very early. Remember, we're just over about a week and a half out tomorrow from the election. And a lot of this stuff takes time. Lawsuits take time. Many lawsuits, just for some context, okay? In Arizona, a DUI will take 6 months to resolve. The court wants it done within 6 months. That's for a simple DUI case, 6 months, right? If you have a complex murder case, those cases take years, sometimes 3 to 5 years for one of those cases. Some civil cases, like car accident cases, where there's massive injuries and a lot of treatment, and same thing. Some of those cases, medical malpractice claims, can take years, decades, in order for them to be resolved. So an election like this, for us to just say, all right, everybody, let's just give it a couple weeks to see what they can come up with and see what their arguments are, that's not unreasonable. People who the next day were saying Donald Trump should resign. It's been a week. He should resign. His attorneys haven't hardly even filed anything yet. They haven't even dug into any of the evidence. Now, if we fast forward 3 weeks from now, and the claims are the same and there's no new evidence, at that point in time, I'll have total confidence telling you these claims are not maturing. They're not evolving. There's no new information. There's no new evidence. And we're just going to come back and we'll do the same analysis. And we'll say, look, there's still 300,000 votes. He's still down. He hasn't proved any fraud. He hasn't proved any of these things. And it's time, right? It's time to move on because the December 14th date is coming up. But there's a lot of game left to play. So, I think it's a little bit premature to answer that question. But if you've been a regular of the channel, I think you'll know where I stand in terms of politics and at least these two candidates. And I will leave it at that. All right. So somebody sent this over on Discord. Okay. So this is from Watching You Daily. And it says here, in the 9 counties of Washington state that have their ballots status CSVs, which is like an Excel file, so a comma separated value file. It looks like an Excel file or like a Google Sheets file, so you can see all the different cells, have found that 333 ballots cast here with a Michigan address that could have voted there. I turned over all the data from my state to the Trump investigative team just in case people are not filling out the change of address forms. Yeah, and that's from Watching You Daily. And he's a regular here, and he's got a good point there that there are a lot of a potential for ballots that have been cast from people who don't live in the state anymore. And we talked about a lot of these issues on a show where we covered a little bit about Maidengate, where this idea is that people are actually scouring the voter registration rolls, and they're finding people that are sort of abandoned, right? So like if I had a wife and we got divorced and she changed her name to Gruler, and then we got divorced and she kept it the same, or she changed it back, but there's still a registration on file for my ex-wife / Gruler, they would use her name and then they would go and vote under her, that, under sort of an alias name. And a lot of people are looking into this data, and I it's not a bad spot, because you have to imagine a lot of these voter registration rolls are just totally unmaintained. And if you're finding people who went and were living in one state, moved across state lines and voted in 2 states, that's a big no-no. You don't get to do that. That's double dipping. And if somebody was making people aware of that or exploiting that somehow, saying, oh, I know this person moved because we got the national change of address database. We know all these people moved out of state, and so we're just going to request ballots for their abandoned aliases in their home states and then go vote using those ballots. Right? That's not a bad little strategy there. And so I think that's what people are starting to identify. Now, whether that's going to be something that turns over anything, then or actually reverses anything, we will see. But it's a good point, and you found 333 ballots. I'm sure there are many, many more out there. That's from watching you daily. All right, everybody. Well, listen, we're going to wrap it up right here. I want to thank you so much for being a part of the program. I love having these conversations and these chats. I'm learning a lot. I hope you're learning a lot and getting some value out of the program. I would love it if you'd share the program. So, we have these talks every day of the week. So Monday through Friday, it's 5 p.m. Arizona time, 4 p.m. California time, 6 p.m. Central over there in Texas, and then 7 p.m. on the East Coast. So, if you have anybody who wants to come join us and be a part of the live chat, join our Discord server, because the conversation keeps going there after the show ends, and I pop in over there because I don't have time to sit here and chat with you guys on the live stream. So I hang out on the Discord server, and sometimes I'll post my slides or answer questions, and I get a lot of good information from there. A lot of people actually share links that I read and use in the show. So it's been kind of one of the coolest things that we've done lately for this channel, and I would encourage you to go check it out. And also, by the way, if you know anybody who's been charged with a crime in the state of Arizona, that's what we do here. That's my day job. I just had a 3-hour-long arbitration that I was in earlier today. It's a long thing, but it was good. That's what we do on a daily basis. And so if you know anybody who's been charged with a crime in the state of Arizona, send them our way. We'd love to help them. We have an awesome team of people here. We do a great job. Been growing fast because I think we're doing the right thing. We're trying to help good people get their lives back on track. So would really appreciate your referrals, would appreciate your shares, and of course, would love your subscription. So hit that subscription button if you have not already done that. One more super chat came in from SSW Lamb from looks like also maybe over there from Europe. So thank you, my friend. Thanks for being here. And I will leave you all at that. Have an amazing night. I will see you back here tomorrow to wrap up the week